To whom much is given, much is required. Part of that requirement is sharing. Culture is the heartbeat within our lives, and it's at the core of so many things. While we live in a time when we are starving for wisdom, I welcome you to your wisdom retreat at Culture Raises Us. Today's guest, Daryl Phillips, Executive Director of the ASAP Foundation, which is dedicated to fostering greater awareness of drug and substance abuse. The Always Strive and Prosper Foundation was actually birthed by the unfortunate passing of ASAP Yam some years ago, and they've minimized really the impact of drug abuse, misuse, and propaganda since. Daryl's also very much an experienced entrepreneur, director, producer of film, multimedia in general, and other forms of entertainment. But before we get into his story, I would love to get your thoughts on when you hear culture, what does that mean to you?
Culture. I've heard many incantations throughout your podcast. I think for me, it's just that special sauce, that like secret sauce that KFC has or whoever may have, that Prego, that Ragu. But it's the elements that kind of combine to give something a composite, um, like secret language or a language amongst
Mhm.
people that is revolves around things in the culture, the composite pieces being art, food, language, um, and things that are just the everyday communication that create way of life for specific people.
Yeah, it's as you talk about food, I often make that immediate correlation as well, in terms of what culture represents in many instances for me as well. But I've had the pleasure of knowing you ever since elementary school, and since a very, I think, early age, you've always been someone that I've respected and admired because you came from this like amazing village of women who always took such great care of you, and I now see how that's rubbing off on you with your commitment to helping others with what you're doing with the ASAP Foundation. And this ability to kind of inform and educate others is truly a gift. And I think sets the tone to why this conversation with you is so important. So tell us the story behind the creation of the ASAP Foundation.
Well, I think that if I take it to its full extent, I think it all started with ASAP Yams himself. Many years prior to even the foundation existing, which was the concept of ASAP itself, which was always strive and prosper. And I think for Yams, it was as an architect of things, was creating a name of something that you could believe in, that was inspiring, that was more so than just thought provoking or shock and awe, which I think is given to a lot of street epithets or cultural epithets. Is like he focused on something that would ring synonymous, that would encourage and be inspiring within the culture itself.
Right.
People say, "Oh, is it ASAP? Is it as soon as possible?" Or no, it's always strive and prosper, which is something that you always want to be able to do as a being. And prosper doesn't have to be financial; it can be emotional, it could be spiritual, it could be through simple things in your community can have you prosper. Um, and so from that, I think when he started the mob, and when the mob started coming together, it was about embodying different pieces and aspects of the culture, always striving and prospering through the culture itself, um, and having different elements that represented a collective of artists, and whether it could be fashion, whether it could be rap or hip hop or production. And so from that, I think he had this holistic perspective on what culturally could be embodied under something or within something. And then meeting Rocky and the collective when they were developing, spent a lot of time around them filming and doing other media and content development. And I think on his passing, having been able to share moments with him and experience and understand his true intellect and inspiration, his mother, when we were connected, was just like, I want to do one thing to be able to have one other person not overdose, or one thing that can speak to another parent so that they don't go through this loss, or if they go through this loss, we are here to help them. So, and then she was very adamant about keeping that same an acronym in place for what we were going to go move forward, which was, this is what he really believed in, this is what he thought, this is what he came up with. So let's keep this as synonymous with the work that we plan on doing.
Well, and it sounds like you're casting or have the ability to cast an even wider net than just the work that you're doing within the drug space. When you talk about the striving and prospering and always prospering, like that just doesn't stay within the space of what you're doing all this great current work in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the work itself is has become, I think, an umbrella of harm reduction.
Mm.
And the idea of when we started, we were definitely focused more on drugs, but then we were also had to find our footing and understood the place that that we wanted to augment, or the niche that we wanted to focus on within the harm reduction. And I think once after having a chance meeting with Dr. Carl Hart, it was understood that we wanted to create something that could speak to Yams himself if he was still with us,
Mm.
to speak to the demographic that he was a part of, and have messaging that could work for them. That we weren't going to be talking about abstinence and talking about stopping 12-year-olds from smoking, and more so about communicating to people how they could do things safer, not to die. Uh,
Right.
and that was the goal. And I think until I mean, we thought of it holistically also as like, okay, we're doing back to school events. Let's do a big back to school event. Let's do where we give out backpacks and toys, or backpacks and school supplies. And we have a toy drive. And then we had a Mother's Day event, which did makeovers. And then we've also done sound bath or sound meditations and catering. And that was for mothers that had lost loved ones or have individuals in their family still going through substance use and abuse issues. So for us, there's a holistic aspect of it overall, which is like, how can we reduce the most harm with affected and impacted individuals? And then also, how can we focus on safer tips or safer education regarding drug use, misuse, and abuse, so that we can prevent overdose?
Yeah, which again is another amazing thing that I think you all bring to the table, and you just said it so eloquently about this is not about driving abstinence, right? This is about driving awareness that if you do, here are some of the tools and the things that we'd like to share with you to inform you on how to manage it as well as possible, right?
Yes.
And I think when I look at drug culture as a holistic, drugs themselves and substance abuse, I think there is a significant role that still plays in shaping the culture that we know to date, right? And before the unfortunate passing of Stephen, was his name, right?
Mhm.
Yams. Was there a particular moment where you realized how big and instrumental this drug culture was to influencing our overall culture of life?
So I think a couple of things come to mind. One is us growing up in the I would say earlier hip hop years.
Hmm.
A lot of and I don't, without drug culture, it was actually, hip hop was our news channel, and it was telling us what was going on in our community, and we knew like herb for us, weed was like a
That's
big
right.
thing. It was Cypress Hill,
That's right.
rolling a blunt, Phillies. It became a different thing that was like, weed became a big part of our hip hop culture and our hip hop experience for most of us at that time. And then also, I think that that was a cushion because crack was something that was like in our face at
Mm,
that time, and so there was this dichotomy or like split, which was like, okay, conscious, quote unquote, conscious rap, or like certain parts of rap, whether it was Tribe Called Quest or whether it was, Funk Dubious or Cypress Hill or things like that, they were embracing marijuana as kind of like a safer conversation or regular conversation. And then there was the aspect of the economy of drugs in our music and in our
mm,
culture. You know what I'm saying? Which was, I'm gonna get rich doing this, or this is what I do to get by.
mhm.
One thing I think that taught us in the future, but we didn't really understand it then, was to not stigmatize drug use or what aspect people play in the drug ecosystem. So I try to understand that overall. But I think then I knew the power of drugs in the culture, and that's also in rock and roll. That's in the
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to open up the conversation and look at what drugs are. I look at people and they say, "Oh, well, this person is doing this, or this person is a such and such head, or a cokehead, or this person." But I'm like, but you drink 8 cups of coffee a day.
Ooh, come on, bro. Come
You
on.
know,
Whoa.
so it's everybody has their forms of self medication. Everybody has their forms of being able to sustain their functionality. And we can't really demonize certain people that may have different weight in life and need a different kind of um, thing to get them by. And I'm not supporting that, but I'm just saying let's take away all the judgment, and then we can actually start dealing with people one on one and provide help. It's usually not the drugs itself; is what's behind the issue.
Mm. Yo, the way you just broke that down of how when we were growing up, to your point, the demonization of drug use.
Mhm.
How do you look at that now with cannabis being this for-profit business model that's very different from when we came up, but also I think is very synonymous with that of the era of when prohibition with liquor,
Mhm.
right? And this coming of this now huge industry that many people and families and lineage of families have benefited from. How do you now see that helping to not only minimize the demonization, which it has, I think
Mhm.
we could both agree to that, but that there is this element of, okay, now that it's legal, it's even easier for you to now position the type of conversation and mindset that you just shared, even more so, I would assume.
Yeah, I think the idea is that, I mean, the overall goal that I think or ideal for me is that all drugs are legalized at some point, because
Mm.
there are certain drugs that are legalized now. And I think we just look at it in a way, we look at it how things impact communities. So, alcohol, more people are dying from DUIs and alcoholism and substance abuse than usually most other drugs combined. But this is legal and it's actually pushed in a certain way. But I think there's a way that we have to get to regulation. And part of the reason why we have so many problems right now with fentanyl and other things being in other drugs is because we have this black market that we can't, that I don't want to say control, but a black market that is relegated to not being regulated. And so that is what threatens people. We don't, like, back in the day during prohibition, people were still using alcohol and getting alcohol, but it was tainted with all kinds of substances to make.
Mm.
And then once it was legal again, it was regulated in a certain aspect to decrease that aspect of alcohol having all these other different adulterants that might cause you to be more inebriated or intoxicated, but not were distilled correctly. And
Hmm.
that's the system that we're kind of in right now. And I think overall, as far as the cannabis situation, it's almost upsetting, and it's unfortunate that so many families in our community had their lives ruined by cannabis and marijuana drug laws. And a lot of us went to jail, and
Mhm.
now it's open because it's more of a capitalist endeavor that helps taxes. It's something that has become commonplace. Now it's like coffee, it's like tea. But now we're kind of left out of that game and left out of the ability to have the economic upside of it, um, particularly because we've been left out of so many of the capitalist, pioneering leaps that happen. So I look at that as unfortunate, and hopefully people will be able to find other ways to make use of cannabis and make use of the cannabis economy without it just being flower sales. It could be.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because a big conversation that we have here is, how moving forward are we going to continue to shape and mold the cultures that we have participated in, created, and in many cases given the IP away.
Mhm.
And this one, and the way you just discussed it, there's a lot of work that we need to do to ensure that we are on the front end and not the back end. Do you have any thoughts or ideas or insight on where those places are, what those things are that we should be doing so we don't get caught on the back end again?
Well, unfortunately, we are in the back end. We're already behind the 8 ball as far as this, the cannabis economy is situated, I think, for
Mm,
its next stage. But I think overall, people have to look at things, I would say, an entrepreneurial aspect is like, how are they connected to something? So if I want to start something new, a new business, I want to make cookies. Okay, do I know how to cook? Am I a chef? Do I like
mhm.
food? And so I think in the cannabis culture, people, need to just understand that there's a big playing field overall, and then see where they can fit into that playing field if this is a passion or if this is an area or industry they want to be involved in. So it's like, okay, I can be involved in creating CBD products or THC products that can be edibles, it can be salves, it could be
Mhm.
different things that are actually medicinal, not only recreational. And look at the different layers of where you want to see yourself um, in that situation. I know somebody that's like doing packaging, and that's
Mm.
all they do. They just do
Yeah.
packaging, and they do packaging design, and they're doing very well. And that was having been in the aspect of growing, cultivating flower, and
Right.
just like, oh, actually, this is where my true gift is in that,
So let me apply it to that.
the
And
graphic.
guess what? You're applying some magic because you can't even tell with some of these joints what's regular candy or what's cannabis infused. Bro, wild. I've got stories.
Yeah. No, it's true. But that's what happens when it becomes an industry.
Right.
Before it was, I think I'm old enough to remember weed in manila envelopes, as shake or pre rolls, and then now we see it as packaged and it's got shelves. We got dispensaries, we've got stores acting like dispensaries, so it's evolved, and all the aspects of something are going to evolve with it, such as hip hop. Before it was like, okay, it was a certain things. It was 12-inch records and singles. And then I think we remember hip hop albums all of a sudden, and Raising Hell or Beastie Boys with, so then it became something, the more it became an industry, the more that the other aspects of like someone's like, oh, I just design album covers, and it's
That's
like,
right.
or I do graphics for a record label and I'm getting $200,000 a year. And so there becomes these industries, and you figure out where you fit in
Where you
with the
fit in.
or your passions that you have.
Well, I tell you, man, the power of influence is very real. And I say that because what many may not know is that you were probably my first exposure and example of having a serious shoe game, bro.
Good.
Because and this goes back to third grade where we met and we
Mhm.
built our brotherhood. Because you always had, the latest and greatest due to being the little brother of big sisters who were fly,
Mhm.
and your mother who always kept you so fresh. I see this strong correlation to what you are now doing, but want to know, how do you see your influence helping in this next generation of youth and beyond, understanding of the implications of, just dire, drug consequences?
Well, I think that's okay, seeing trends. I think that's what goes back to our youth. It's like kind of seeing trends and where we see ourselves in it. So it's like, okay, we like these shoes. You and I would go to KP Kong or
That's right.
Choice. And,
Choice on
you know,
103rd. So
so we were looking at these spaces and was like, okay, this is where what we're into. And we recognized the trend that we wanted to be a part of. And I think a lot of the youth today are recognizing aspects of the trends that they would like to be a part of. Like they're not into smoking weed as much, but they're into taking pills.
mm,
So where I look at that, or for the last 10 years, a lean was a very big part of the culture of the hip hop.
hmm
And then, but what hasn't been identified is the downsides. Part of it because people haven't gone through the downsides. But I look at it, and so let's say now when we're talking about fentanyl, right? And so fentanyl
hmm
being in um, cocaine or ketamine, or it might be an MDMA. So it's making its way into powdered substances. And that's what's attributing to a large increase in overdoses as well. But when I look at it that it's present in black market pills, and pills are becoming much more popular amongst youth of a certain age group from like 12 to 25. as far as like a new demographic, um, in a mass way. Um, then you look at it, I was like, oh, there's a big danger. There's a big red flag here because a lot of these pills are going to be tainted with fentanyl.
Hmm.
A younger person or a person in general, but I feel that this has more threat for the youth is that they may be thinking they're getting a perk 10, a perk 20, and it's actually 10 times stronger. Or part of that pill has fentanyl in it, so it's something that is probably going to cause them to overdose because their opiate tolerance is not that high. The person did not properly, put this substance together or this pill together. So that's why I look at it as like the future of like, oh, they really need to know these things. They need to know the jeopardy they're um, in regards to what's available in that market. So we have, besides what we've been doing with our fentanyl test strip kits, which we distribute to bars and restaurants in the city. Um, that was something that we saw as like, hey, wait, this is a community that's already taking drugs. It's in a bar, and you know, drug use is going on here already. Let's see what we can do to put these boxes in here that have fentanyl test kits, has easy instructions that people can take these home with them. So it's a matter of just creating, I think, an area or an aspect of the culture that's interested in engagement and information so that they can increase their awareness. The youth is already in tune to trends, so we have to someone make a trend in normalizing drug testing, like
Mm.
person testing. So like, okay, if I'm using drugs, I need to personally test it, or I need to inquire where those drugs came from. So it's not just, oh yeah, pass me that spliff, or oh, you have a couple of pills. It's like, where these come from, and then hey, we should test these before we use it because people are dying from misuse.
Hmm.
So that's it. We just have to standardize, make that a trend in itself that people are becoming safer. And I think that's a little bit of our underlying, or a lot of our goal is to normalize and make it a trend to be safe in drug use.
Yeah, and another thing that I think you are exemplifying is the notion of meeting people in situations where they are.
Definitely.
Right, right. Like what you just walked through is a beautiful case study of meeting people where they are as opposed to trying to meet them where you need them or want them to be, right? You've adapted, and when you look at trends, that's the thing with trends, right? You now, once you know the trends, okay, so now what are you going to do with that information, and how are you going to meet people in that space rather than try to counter the trend because it might not work with the vision of the long-term plan that you have, rather than take the trends, meet people where they are, and then help get them to where you'd like them to be.
Exactly, which you are a master of. I may have started a small shoe game, but I remember when you first were like, seeding the newest, latest sneakers on certain celebrities within the industry, and you kind of knew people's personal style. You were meeting them where they were at with what you had or what you thought was specific to them. And I think that's the same thing as being able to, in this space more than ever, I've learned to remove a lot of my prejudice, judgment, and stigmatization of individuals.
And that's work, dog. That
It's a
is
lot of
work
work. Yep.
because we are so programmed, and we are also so suffering from that being done to us.
Yes, and we have to remove these algorithms that we've already adapted to that we kind of assume about certain people. I would say, I understood and had seen people that were used heroin or used opiates. I think since I was a kid and I can remember, but I didn't particularly know that through protracted use and I would say substance overuse that they were actually experiencing extreme pain and that the neural network was being rewired so that a normal thing of life actually was a very painful day for them because the
Mm.
withdrawal from the drug was really making them feel pain and sickness and nausea, bone pain, headaches. So when we look at somebody and you just think, oh, they're just, somebody would just say, oh, that's a fiend. Why would you even pay attention to them? And it's like, wow, no, you're not even paying attention. That person really is going through a lot of pain right now and we just don't have any understanding of it.
Mm.
So true that was one of the early realizations where I understood like, oh, okay, I have to change my whole framework on
That's right.
you know, In our era, we grew up kind of looking at people that were, we used the word crackhead probably a million times in our life,
Yep.
uh, which is horrible, at this point. And
Hmm.
and we just kind of relegated these people to the side as far as like, you made your future, you made that bed, you lie
You
in it.
made that bet.
And even I would say in the economy of drug dealing or drug vending, being a merchant, it was that same perspective. Like, I'm selling this to you, but that's your bed, you lie in it. And
That's
we
right.
desensitized towards, how we were all playing a part in the same system, and how overall the larger institution of government, law enforcement, were actually playing a much bigger part in that criminalization aspect, and then overall also just, I think that the overall destruction of our communities. I think.
Well, listen. Now you pinching a nerve because studies definitely indicate that Black communities are disproportionately affected by drug overdoses and the consequences of substance abuse, right? So, from your perspective, what's the underlying causes of this disparity?
I mean, I believe the disparity. If we go back to it, it's just, the original kidnap of our ancestors to this country, that disparity, and then starting and then building up the industries of this country, um, and not being able to be a part of that ownership. And then I think, you look at things like Black Wall Street in Tulsa, and we're talking about these things now, or that there was a Harlem Renaissance in the 20s, but we still have destabilization in our education system. So we look back at our history and we see the points where we were thriving, and there was this institution of government and law enforcement that chose to destabilize that thriving, and gerrymander and do different things so that we can't be united, or that we're relegated to the outsides of cities and we're away from resources. Um, Food, clothes, and shelter not being able to be an aspect of everyday life, it becomes that disparity. So what happens, I think, in my perspective, or what I've read a lot, is that become a side of our psychological and our environment around us becomes destabilized, and therefore we are looking to self-medicate, or we become destabilized in that aspect. But I would think it's the education system first and foremost
That needs to, yeah.
that needs to change in our communities. And then second of all, I think there has to be an understanding of, when we stop seeing ourselves as the disproportionate number in the incarceration system, then we will start seeing a change in that as well. And it's not because we're doing more crime, it's just that we're being targeted for more crime.
Mm.
So.
You dropped a couple bars there, bro. I'm gonna let that marinate and sit. Um, this work, the work that you're doing, is so much great work. So much great work. I would love for you to share. Was there like a particularly impactful success story of like this transformative moment that the foundation kind of facilitated that you can share? Because I'd love for people to not only get an understanding of what the foundation's about, what you're all about, and the why, but then also maybe an example, a case study of, and here's something that we point our finger to say, this is where we knew there was some amazing magic that we can now show to multiple people.
um I would say there was a realization moment, and that was really given by Dr. Carl Hart, who has a couple of books. One is a High Price, and
Hmm.
another one is called Drug Use for Grownups. He was the head of the Department of Psychology at Columbia University. He's a brother from Carroll City, um, and he was also one of the foremost scientists in the area, being able to tell you what drugs do, and how addiction works, and how it is impacted. And it's really through psychological environment, so, and everything that we heard, and what he showed me was that everything we heard about drug use and stigmatizing drug use and addiction was wrong. And that's some other reading we could go into later. So that was like an aha moment. Like, everything I've been thinking about drug addiction and drug use is wrong. And then now, okay, let me learn what's right, and what's the better perspective. And then from there, I think for us, being able to understand um, users, vendors, and everything within the drug ecosystem is what you want to be able to understand. Understanding that the crack era and the laws were slanted, and In order to get caught, in order to get the same restriction or the same penalty, you had to have 5 grams of crack. You had to have 500 grams of powder. So
Right.
if I have to make money selling 5 grams of crack over and over and over again, that puts me in a higher target of being
That's
punished for
right.
that. And now I'm getting a higher sentencing. So,
Mm.
looking at those things, you can see that how the government is implicit in, our criminalization in this area. And then I think for a aha moment for us was during the pandemic and giving out fentanyl test strips, and kind of we put them in these boxes that are kind of like fishbowl kind of concepts when you saw fish bowls with condoms and bars or in high schools
Yeah.
back in the day. So kind of taking that same concept and saying, well, look, if we have something that doesn't really mess with the aesthetics of an environment, can we put this in these bars in certain places? Started with one place, second place, third place. And then I started to see traction. And at first, everyone was very much again, oh, wait, no, it's fentanyl test. We don't need that in here. We don't have that customer.
Yeah.
How do
Please.
you know you have that customer? You're selling it.
Exactly. That's like, no, my child doesn't listen to hip hop.
Exactly. So, there was this idea and fear aspect, but then I think what it was I started appealing to like bartenders and managers actually started losing friends. And, it remind this over. So we began to give out the kits, and then certain places became more apt and more open to taking them. And then there was an Eater article, and then a Washington Journal article, or Washington Wall Street Journal article, or New York Times talking about this program amongst the harm reduction work of the city. So it was like, okay, so what we're doing is right. And then when I started seeing that the boxes would be empty now, and that people were aware of what these things were and picking them up, and that there were a place that was running out after a month is now running out after a week or a weekend,
Mm.
showing me that we were doing something right. And then as now the numbers kept increasing as far as overdoses and now people paying attention to it, um, we felt that this was great that we were able to provide these tools for people to be able to be safer in their use and safer and really just really hopefully keeping themselves alive. And
Mm.
start getting feedback from people that were doing tests and showing positive results of fentanyl in the drugs that they did not expect it to be in. And that was like, I mean, that was like a roller coaster ride, like exhilarating. It was just like, oh
I'm
my God,
sure.
like this is amazing that they used it. So people are like, oh, you're saving lives. I'm like, I'm not saving lives. We're not saving lives. When you use these kits to test your drugs, you are saving your life and you're
Your
saving
life.
people's lives. And you're also saving the pain of your family, your friends, your kids, whoever it may be. You're actually making yourself be here in one more day for them, which I think was Tatiana Yams' mother's original goal when she came to me, was being able to give people any kind of tools or messaging to keep themselves safer. So I think we've been able to get that part, and that's been amazing to see that these things are being snapped up.
This
But
pet.
that awareness is growing overall, But as you know, being my brother from another mother, is that this whole era reminds me of early HIV era and
Yep.
AIDS, and kind of like people not talking about things, or people thinking it's only affecting a certain demographic. And
Hmm.
then all of a sudden, it's affecting every demographic, and everyone's like, oh, ring the alarm. So I think that's where we're at right now, where it's like within 5 years, everyone will probably know someone that has overdosed. It will be
Hmm.
a degree or 2 degrees of separation, which is unfortunate. But I think, that's where we're going, where it's like everybody thought this was relegated to people that only use certain drugs, or people that have addiction issues, or people that are, shooting drugs or things like that.
Hmm.
That's not it. And it's no longer just about substance abuse. It's about substance use.
Mm.
And that like somebody who's taking a pill for their first or second time, who doesn't have any experience or too much knowledge about buying pills, getting pills, could be taking a pill laced with fentanyl and die. And that's not because they were an addict. It's not because they had a long use of drug use. It was just because of negligence and the lack of awareness and education.
Well, I think part of the process that you just walked through, you talked about the learning of drug use and drug addictions and it being wrong. What was that? What was that part?
Drug use and drug. Oh, so that part really revolves around. We had those commercials. This is your brain on drugs. You know,
Yes, I remember those.
fried egg. Black Pan, Nancy Reagan, Ronald Reagan. Meanwhile, these guys, they're using cocaine to fund Iran Contra missions. So um, at that point, from Carl Hart, what we were learning is that like there were studies done where they put a rat, let's say a rat in a cage, and say,
Hmm.
okay, here's some water with some cocaine in it or heroin in it, and then you'll watch the rat run around a cage, go back, keep going back, drinking the water with the cocaine, keep going back, keep going back. So they're like, oh, look at this. This is how addictive this substance is. But they're not looking at the fact that they have the rat in a cage. So now let's say you put a rat in a big cage, with 50 other rats, some food, and some cocaine and some water. The rat's gonna go to the cocaine water much less. It's gonna
Hmm.
do rat stuff with rats. It's gonna go meat. It's gonna go hang out. It's gonna go dig a hole. It's gonna go over, and it's probably gonna come back to the drugs at some point as well. But it is not completely a vortex of drug use. So what we
Hmm.
look at is our communities are like these cages, and our lives can be these cages. Not just to say this is marginalized experiences, but our communities are cages. We have food deserts, we have projects, we have all these things that keep people encapsulated like a cage, in which now you put drugs in there as one of the only aspects of self medication. It's not like we're doing yoga studios in these places,
Mm.
or how about health food places?
Come on, man.
We have
Come
two
on.
liquor store, we have fried fish place, and a bodega maybe that has like cookies and sugared cereal, which is probably our first introduction into drug use, sugar,
Boom.
drug abuse, sugar, so it already starts patterning the youth and our kids and ourselves with sugar as a drug that's in almost everything we have at our food location. That's not really even food, so the abuse issue starts early, or the substance use issue starts early, and then we look at it as like, yeah, we got to change our psychological, physical environments in order to break these like cycles. And so I'm not, I don't look at it as, oh, this person just had, it's just really usually a couple of mishaps in life that cause people to take drug use functionality and then become um, dysfunctional. And it can be the marriage, it could be a divorce, it could be a bad grade on a test, it could be a lack of love from parents, it could be so many things that just kind of trigger that excess. Um,
Hmm.
it's not about a personal weakness. It's about just maybe not having that support structure.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And
that
now you're definitely, kind of teetering into, even broader conversations with your sentiment here, even outside of, drug use or the misuse or the mishaps around them. And given, your extensive history that I kind of alluded to in the beginning within the music industry and content production of documentaries regarding social justice and activism, if nobody can tell yet by the way that you speak. What's your thoughts on the current state of our culture and what's needed for the further advancement of marginalized communities?
um what we need, I mean, we need a lot.
I know.
And we need to really have unity. And I think one major thing that I'm like paying attention to more is like, the equation of like the black capitalism and black excellence, you know,
Hmm.
and I think we have to get more into like personal achievement, and focusing on what we can do to increase our own personal value, self-value, and personal ownership and accountability, and then being able to read, listen, and I think share. So Michael K. Williams, who you also know is a friend, who passed away as well from a drug, from an overdose and fentanyl related. He mentioned to me so many times about like, it's not about getting out the community, or like making it and making yourself successful so that you get out of the community. You don't want to get out of your community. What you want to do is be able to go get resources from outside of your community and bring them back.
mm,
And stop going from like, oh, I used to live there, I made all this money, now I lived in a gated community. It's like, okay, but why can't you live back in your community? And if you can't live back in your community, then you should consistently be giving to, not giving back, but giving to. You should definitely continue to have place and have commitment and passion for the communities you come from, and stop thinking about escaping, because where you're escaping to is not going to be helping your community.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? The new friends and the new people that you're around are not focused on helping your community unless it's a tax write-off. You know,
mm.
it's about how can we stay in the trenches, and how can we continue this, continue to support the struggle. And if you come from the community, you know what those struggles are. And it's often just being able to have that, like, that aspect of, oh, I learned this over here, or I got this over here, let me bring it back to you. And not piecemealing it. So I just look at that as one thing. And then, I think is reading, listening, and sharing is like the main things that I think that are simple to be able to access if you have nothing, but life itself, or if you do have a bunch of things, you still want to be able to share. And I think those are the three elements that I'm trying to focus on personally.
Well, listen, I always end these with the three seeds that you'd want to leave with stewards of culture moving forward. And I think that was a crystal clear breakdown of your three seeds on the personal development, which when you walk through the story of, because even I've fallen guilty of, yeah, I'm not in the neighborhood no more. I'm, here. I'm in LA, I'm in Portland, I'm in wherever. And you're right that there has to be an element you would think of, well, why did I have to leave?
Mm-hmm.
Why couldn't I still, be there and contribute there to elevate that to where it needed to be? And, you know, the blessing of being in an environment that had a great mix of all things, which you and I mean, literally, and I'm very biased, we grew up in one of the best neighborhoods ever in terms of the exposure that we had of multiple things, good, bad, and indifferent, right? And all playing a significant part in that gumbo of like 20%, 30%, 20%, not like a 80-20,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of, oh, it's just all pristine and good, and then
Yeah,
just got 20% of the nonsense.
yeah.
Like we grew up and we got a little bit of all of it,
Mm-hmm.
which I think helped to round us out. So as I hear you talk about that conversation and that thought, it's such a powerful notion that I think can help trigger the mentality of many of the next generation to relook and rethink on how we position ourselves and what defines success,
Mm-hmm.
right? What really defines success? And that too, I think, is a personal conversation.
Definitely. I mean, I think everything is personal right now. If you can remove the ego from it, then you're able to like access the wealth of it. But you're not a lead. I don't think people are leaders because they choose to be leaders, but because they are actually setting good example. So and that's sometimes, or setting example, so to speak, because it may not always be best example. People can lead people into other things, but leadership is a quality of like probably a person that is doing a lot of self work and understands in a certain way of being able to share that information with others, and that gives them a little bit more power, and it gives them a little bit more followers, so to speak, or collective.
Well, listen, bro. One of my desires in having you on was based off the fact that you played a significant role in my life. Um, you
Likewise.
know, I looked up to you from day one on how you carried yourself. You were always a very refined, smart, and then fresh, brother and friend. And you exemplify what you just said of removing the ego to access the wealth. You've always been a wealth of knowledge, of character. I mean, you went to, and like everything you've done, I've always been applauding you and been like, this guy has made me a better person because I was then striving to be like, yo, Daryl's doing it, B. I gotta do it. I gotta do it. And
Likewise,
so
that was both ways. That was
no, listen, and I appreciate that, but I want you to get these roses. You're gonna take these roses right now. And so as I look at what you're doing with this foundation, bro, I can't tell you how proud I am and why I wanted to share this because there's many who are not maybe exposed to you and what you're doing and the work and the great work of the foundation and Yam's mother's vision to stay behind this. But it is so necessary. You're so appreciated and valued. And I just thank you for being the stand up individual that I got to meet in third grade, bro. Those principles have grown tremendously in you and have not dried up. And for that, I want to applaud you and thank you.
well. Thank you because I mean, thank you in general as my brother, and I thank you because you've always been that consistent inspiration as a brother, as a father, as an entrepreneur, as a person that was just really always looking to excel. And so it was like part of like a reflection aspect. So I was like, damn, Aster's doing it. So I could do it. And then also like your family, your mom, your dad, that was like, that was part of that special sauce in the culture. So
Mm.
coming to your house, it was a cultural experience, whether it was the curry chicken,
Talk, come on.
or
Mother's
whether it
proud
was
about that curry chicken, bro.
that lemonade, and it was a certain aspect, but also you know, your mom would be working, my mom would be working, but I was like at your place. I was at your house, or I could be there. And that was like a second family. And so that's part of our cultural experience. It's like, oh, that's my brother, but no, we have different mothers or we in different households, but this is my brother, and I'm treated as family. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think I remember even when I was going away to school, you and your mom brought me a book bag, and
Mm-hmm.
bought for me to excel at school, and so that was part of the village support. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
one of my first vacation with your family, and it was
Mm-hmm.
like us, and I'm like, I never been on a vacation. I don't, what's going on. And then your pops. I remember going to Applebee's on Flatbush Avenue and being like, this is amazing, like and so that was a cultural experience also for a person that was growing up without my father present or without my mom being around a lot. I had sisters, but it was like you became a brother, and then it was also like your parents became examples for me as well. It became pillars of principle. Um, that lasted for years with me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that those are the things that when we look back, is those are those little things that can help somebody not go through life in a certain way where substance use becomes something to supplant something that's missing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm always thankful for the relationship and for the open door and for the culture that I was able to experience with you and your family as well.
Mm. Well, Daryl, I can't thank you enough, bro. And I love you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We truly appreciate your support because it helps us fulfill our mission of promoting cultural awareness and personal development. Please click the subscribe button below to help ensure and solidify our mission.